Summer Moon, excuse me, excuse me, Summer Moon Utah Wells is still missing. She has blonde hair and blue eyes and stands likely 3.5 feet tall, weighing around 40 pounds. She was last seen June 15th, 2021, outside her home by her family, who reported her missing that day. Oopsie daisies. Law enforcement say they have no evidence that Summer has been abducted or trafficked out of the area. However, there remains an active Amber Alert for Summer Moon Utah Wells. The search remains as well for a late 90s to early 2000s model red Toyota Tacoma, which had a ladder rack and white buckets in the back when it was spotted outside of Summer's home on Ben Hill Road by what is believed to have been a postal worker, and they were named as a possible witness. If you have any information in regards to Summer's whereabouts, you are urged to call 1-800-TBI-FIND immediately. Summer number 14. Jody says, "Let me explain here that I and the neighbor that had already been looking are basically the only two neighbors that knew what Summer looked like. The other neighbor that joins Candace and them, even though they're connected, whereas her and I really aren't, nor is the other one, but he has visual too. And because the kids play on that side of the hill and it's more clear, and because Candace and Donnie and I talked to them and they all know what everybody looks like, so that's why they are some of the best neighbors you could ever want, because I don't care what the media tells you, everybody in there ain't crazy. Most people in there are good," she says. I mean, seriously, there's retired vets, there's ex-police, there's hospital workers. There's only like 11 or 12 of us in there, right? There's not what it's being made out to be. Like, everybody is pretty quiet. We were the youngest and had the least traffic. And I mean this sincerely. My family came there, which part of that was what we were going through separately there. Also, I just don't like visitors either, Jody says. Kind of a homebody, she says. It was definitely part of the abuse I've been through there and that they've been through there for about a decade. So we had the least visitors of anybody, even though we were the youngest, she says. Any neighbor in there, if you ask them, someone's going to have your back at midnight, noon, it don't matter. Like, these are good people, she says. So anyway, and hardworking people, she adds. Postal workers in there, you name it. It's not what you think it is, she says. The average is like 12, and I think she means of how many people are living back there. A school worker, she adds. It's not what you think it is. So I make my way back to the start of Ben Hill, where it meets the main road, and I think the third car is coming in. Now, she's still talking about June 15th, when the search very first began. She's talking about that third cop car that she's seen coming in. It was an SUV, whatever it was. And I stopped them and I'm like, I heard a scream, and they said, okay, and took note. Everything's going so quick, she says. Other neighbors are coming in and they ask us what she looks like. We describe her, we tell them where we have already searched. Most of those neighbors knew about tracks as well, so try to keep that down. So then things just start obviously going from there. I think it best that I don't speak really on the things after that period, or just because of, well, she says. I think the main events right there in those first few moments and hours are what matters the most, Jody says. There is nothing really after that besides what pertains to search crews and, obviously the main parts and what follows after a situation like this. I can tell you that some of us had a hard time because we had already like spread the word. The word was out and everything was kind of searched before even like we all knew the properties well enough to know where and to look at all of ours quickly enough to know that, and we all get it. We understand. But yeah, there were things, like the tree cutters came back in and stuff, like starting the next morning. And for almost the entire time, the search crews were in there. Mail and trash were cut out for 10 to 12 days, something like that. The tree crews started back the next morning, though, and we all kind of worried if they were like accidentally destroying evidence or moving scents, and we didn't really understand. I don't think we still do as a community. There were things with that made us uncomfortable, including, excuse me, at one point, like, I had went down, and for like the third time now, mind you, we all had to show ID to get in and out of there for weeks. You weren't coming and going like you had, and for the most part you were not coming and going anyway, because you were on property with search crews and things like that, and dogs came through to search the houses and the buildings and the properties. It was literally one crew after the next, after the next, after the next, day in and day out for weeks and weeks, plus the helicopters and the drones, and it was. But these tree crews were in there. I think the number of them had gone down quite a bit, but they had finally started in this piece of property on the right of way at a point, and we noticed weird stuff. So I was sitting there once again to remind them the wood needed to be left laying, and there was some weird questions like, how old is your daughter, and cutting in a spot that had already been cut that didn't make sense to me, then right behind the question about my daughter's age. It was weird, but I'm not accusing anyone of anything. There was another guy who had joked about how he could take off with the and be gone with a child, and how a place like this would be perfect for something like that. Not Summer, just a child in general. Maybe the guy has no filter, I don't know. It was really inappropriate. That was the same day the tree trimmers, were asked to leave from in there in the holler. There were some issues that they had stopped letting them in. I'm just saying that seems to be how that transpired, because I complained. Not even sorry, Jody says. So the tree trimmers supposedly got kicked out of the holler because Jody complained about them. She reminds me of an old neighbor I used to have. She was a mean old woman that lived alone. She cut my mom's big, beautiful bush that she had in her front yard because it hung over her property line, and she only cut half of it off and left the rest. Jody reminds me of her in a way. So, anyways, she says, other than that, I'm not really going to say much. Otherwise, I have watched. I know that part of the thing is, like Candace, not crying, not doing whatever. I don't think it would. Look, y'all, I've seen her in person. I've talked to her just to talk to her yesterday or this morning. Can't remember which it was. One or the other, though. I mean, she was crying then. She really does sincerely want Summer found, and I don't think it would matter whether she was crying or not. I think everybody would eat her alive. I understand how the optics look. I understand. I get it. I get it just like we all do. I understand part of the issue was first the past tense language before it was even heard. The first night I heard it, and it didn't bother me because I knew that what people who live in the suburbs or easier lives, they're kind of projecting. But when you live the lives of people like this, or who have gone through some of the things, or had the past like Candace, or like us, you learn how to. And sometimes movies seem a little, it's more reality based than. And so I think somewhere in you already think the worst, or it's hard to have hope when you have lived a hard life. Maybe as parents, even though it's hard for some of us to admit openly in public, it's as a parent, which do you hope for? You don't want either, obviously. You don't want either. You hope all those days, right? You hope that she just got mad, wandered off, broke a leg, or is stuck or something, right? That's your best case. But then if they're taken, I mean, let's be real. These people don't take these children to Disney World, guys, and they're either kept and tormented, or they're tormented and it's over, Jody says. And as people who have lived hard lives, I don't fault them for using past tense, and I know they still have hope. I know Candace does. I know we all do, Jody says. I know Candace wants Summer home, just like I know she misses her sons. Anyway, I'll be back, she says. Then that concludes video Summer number 14. Summer number 15. I know that Summer's father had missed and cared for, and I know the community wants her home, and that Candace definitely does. And I don't think Candace had anything to do with this. I don't think the boys had anything to do with this. Personally, I think she was taken. By who? I don't know. I don't think it was animal related or anything, and I'm quite positive it would have been tracks found and obvious signs. But like I said at the beginning of this, you had the 2 seconds before that day, before the calls, Summer started coming off that hill, ever asked me if our children could be taken from us on Candace property or on one where we were till just a few short days ago, I would have laughed, Jody says. So she's saying if you would have asked her within a few minutes before she heard them hollering for Summer if you thought any of the kids could be taken from in that holler, she would have laughed. Because of our particular properties, she says, and I think I missed this point earlier and got because I got a little distracted. The one connected to Candace's is fully connected, and I had never even seen Summer there, and there's nothing but a little bit between them, but they had never laid eyes on Summer, didn't know what she looked like. And there had been people. It's not anything like that. It's just that it's how it works around there and how different the views and sounds and things are. And that's something else I need to touch on, you know? So, what I'm going to tell you next about the sounds and why it is the other neighbors that were outside around the same time I was that the scream happened didn't seem to hear it, but we heard it, is because of the way these properties are shaped and the road is shaped and the hollow itself, and how drastically different it is from the property to property. For weeks, as these searches went on, or at night when it got quieter, or when the drones and helicopters finally stopped, the foliage changed, and I kept a watch over my own daughter and my kid, and that I was doing so was absolutely used to further abuse myself and these children. In the last couple weeks of abuse against us, the Summer situation was absolutely used to hide things from us, to manipulate us, and to abuse us, which is pretty wild. I kept a watch over these two, especially because she's my last little girl. Plus, at this time, the boys were still in there. There's other things close that I'm not going to name because even though some of these groups don't have a problem with property maps coming out and this coming out, maybe they don't realize sometimes it could be leading predators right back in, especially with it being very common knowledge. What makes this community is also maybe its vulnerability, like cell phone service, cop time, you know. So posting or sharing some of the property stuff, or, you know, and I know there's been a lot of people since the beginning going real life. We have had more than a few, you know, not long before we had people who were in there screaming at other neighbors that were going through cancer treatments, just like I was, she says, calling my daughter a freak. You just don't understand. And there was Bigfoot hunters and psychics fighting in the middle of the road. The wildness. I had a perpetrator come back in. We don't know, and it would have been hard to tell with all the real life people coming in there. It just added more confusion once the road was opened back up, and chaos ruled us and definitely kept myself on point. No sleep, cancer. I mean, it was some of the most difficult weeks of my life, and it weighs heavy. This was, there's past tense, and I'm sorry. This is a child that personally I have known and changed her diapers and fed her. Just seeing her in person just the day or two before, and as you can imagine, my children did not take it well, especially my daughter, and she's sensitive anyway, and knowing that our abuser used that knowledge against her as one of the last things he tormented her with, personally, that was about Summer and how she felt about it and did things to make sure. But we went through weeks of just being scared and having all kinds of it. And, you know, she still is very sensitive. So obviously, anyway, the property sounds. Sorry. The neighbors connected. Here's the thing. She says, sorry, guys. My allergies are really bad today. She says, I asked for somebody to help me run testing or something because all these nights that I walked this bank in the hills and the woods and how I was hearing sounds, especially as the foliage changed, because it does change and pick up differently during different seasons. And I was trying to make sure all the foliage hadn't changed too much. So anyway, the pieces kind of came together, she says. I mean, I knew why, but I was trying to have confirmation of that, and I asked repeatedly to help me figure out how to test that. then till recently. So somebody did, and we kind of made sure that would happen before. It's on videotape. It's been recorded. That I'm not wrong. I was wrong. I wasn't wrong from the beginning, but the reasons why the sound was picked up by us and we heard the scream, but Candace couldn't, and the other neighbors couldn't, but we could hear it clear as day. That was all videotaped, apparently. And I'm trying to do this in a way that doesn't bother my other neighbors. So all I'm going to say is that other neighbor, the spot being closer in a way, they can hear what's coming off the left side of Candace's top of her hill on one side of it. The day I went and visited the boys were still there. Some of the last days they were there. They were, screaming and playing, full out playing, very loud. I mean, like, very loudly. I could hear them clear as a bell up my hill at the house and cabin, and I could hear them all the way down the road. And then you get to that property, and I was visiting for a particular reason with this neighbor, and I made it to a point. He made it a point to say, I haven't heard the boys in weeks. Are they in here still? And I'm like, 2 seconds ago, they were just screaming, but nope, couldn't hear them. But while I'm in this property, I could hear some banging. So they're only able to hear what on the left side is and the top in one specific area coming down. They can't hear what I hear on ours. Candace can't hear the screams, She can't hear the scream from the bottom area where if Summer had been snatched, taken, muffled, let go at the bottom driveway areas, Candace couldn't have heard that. There's a way that their bank does, and the hollow carries it. She couldn't hear me. She's not going to hear that scream. Then there were several instances that helped me figure out, and I don't really want to say much about them because they would be identifying enough, and part of it is public record to show which property is what, which would show which people heard what. But there were things that happened, including the police report that I had to make, and I heard gunshots in one area, but other people couldn't hear it. And we had a trespasser one night. The other things that had happened, so that right there told me because certain people couldn't hear certain things, so we tested the theory right and had some children scream just a few days ago in the same spot as we were in the cabin in the same spots, with the bed still there and all of the things still in the same places, almost the same amount of foliage either way. It proved there was a reason why we could hear it, but why Candace and others could not, but thought they should have. And, says Jody, we all have realized why that is now, she says, which we knew on this particular piece of property. It picks up noise from everywhere anyway. Plus, this piece we were on till just a short few days ago also picks up literally, like there's one cow that drives me insane. It's like it was in the cabin doorway, but it's all the way out on the main road near the end of Simpson Loop at the very tail end of it. I can also hear noise just like that from the main road. It depends on what. That particular piece that we were on till just a few days ago, if you wanted to be the neighbor from Bewitched, that's the property for you. That's all I'm saying, Jody says as she laughs. Regardless, there was a very real reason, she says, several, and why it is that we heard and nobody else did, and maybe why people doubt it or it wasn't taken as seriously, while other neighbors didn't. And I'm like, So what we heard was not an animal. It was not a kicked dog. My kids immediately picked it up as the kids. But to me, I wasn't thinking Summer. And it's one of the only regrets I think I have ever had in my whole life. It's like, what if this is, what if that? And I'm not a what if person, but I'll tell you, with this, I have been what if. I wish I had done a lot of things differently that day. I still don't know how I missed something so, especially with that state of hypervigilance and PTSD, I just don't understand. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of leave everything after the cops get there and all everything else off the table because, I think it's the very first few minutes and hours that are crucial, maybe the day before, weeks before. I'm still in my soul and gut believe that Candace had nothing to do with this. The boys had nothing to do with this. I think somebody took Summer. Who, she says? Why, she says? I don't know, she says. I wish I did. Where it concerns answers, I'm no closer than anybody else on the face of the earth right now, and we can only hope that somebody eventually has an aha moment or figures it out and finds her and brings her home, Jody says. I know that all of us hope that everybody keeps sharing her information and picture and doesn't forget her and looks at every little that you see to make sure that it's not her because, I mean, how many cases have there been like this? Definitely keep your eyes and ears open. And like I said, I know how appearances seem and I understand pasts and this, that, and the other. And I get it. But I know Candace wants Summer home. And she may not cry in front of you all, but she does cry. My heart is broke, and I'll tell you that my mom even met her for the first time as we were trying to get us out of the situation we were in. And before that, though, she thought she was guilty. After meeting her, she realized that she'd been dead wrong. So what you see is not what you get or what you expect. And so, like I said, we're not besties or anything, but we're not like, hey, but her and I have somewhat lived, because it's out there. It's not like I'm saying anything that people don't know. But I mean, when one of us, there was a runoff or one of ours had left us without anything or trapped us or whatever, right? And honestly, hers was less prone than Andy to that. I'll tell you, the violence against us was far worse. There was a big deal of what the internet makes of what happened. You all have no idea. On a whole, I mean, only a few instances, like over the hours, was like an everyday, a different style of abuse. But either way, you all have got a hold of the public records, and ours wasn't really reported. Like I said earlier, we're somewhere else now, still trying to figure things out, still trying to be free, still trying to stay safe. But anyway, just keep sharing Summer's information and stuff. And like I asked for, please do not share pictures of my children or private information about them. I would greatly appreciate it, she says. I know they got some sense of normalcy back after our situation, and I would hate for it to be taken from them or any more taken from them than already has been, she says. Please just, if you see something, say something with Summer. And that's the end of Jody's Summer 1 through 16 videos. Jody Sue Brown is a liar. Joe. Frank. Who said what? Country Christian. Martha. Hey, hey. I was wondering if my mom was in here. My mom popped into my chat last night. I'm like, hey, what's up, Mom? She's into true crime. It's okay, I'll be frank, it's over. But yeah, I don't stay too long because I know my baby will wake up if I'm in here for too long. It'll get too loud out there if I'm not out there to supervise. He'll get woke up. You know what I'm saying? But before I go, Good night. Sweet dreams.
Place where you never feel alone. Wish I could bring you some peace. Wishing every day, why can't it just be me? We will stand for you in the cold, the rain, the fire, and the smoke. If only I could get you out. I'd pick you up, never put you down. I'd hold you up close, like a star beside the moon. We could take on the world. Wish I could give you a home, filled with all the ones you love. A place where you never feel alone. Somewhere you can be yourself. We can dance and swing and run if I could.
Yeah, I think I should get. You think I should get a fiddle or a banjo? I'm being dead serious. Should I get a fiddle or a banjo? I already know I want to get a djembe, like one of those big drums. But I need either a fiddle or a banjo, because I need both, but I can only get one or the other at a time. But I gotta start doing more with music. Music for the missing. That could be like my thing. I could do music for the missing and do like live stuff and do some kind of like fundraisers or something. That'd be sweet. People could like donate to it. But I have to build up some confidence for that. Black country banjo players. Hey. That sounds cool. Probably get, I don't know. It's a tough choice. Alright. There's a steel train coming. Summer Moon, Utah Wells. We love you, baby girl. Really, we do. We want your name to be surrounded with love and light. And hope. Just want your name to be surrounded by light and love. This is my version of praying for her. We love you, Summer. Really ain't no time to make the time go away.
So, Mr. DJ, don't stop the music. I wanna know, are you feeling the same way too? Cause nowadays all the songs on the radio all drive me crazy.
We love you, Summer. Have a good night, you guys. Pray for Summer. She's still missing. Still active Amber Alert for Summer Moon Utah Wells. And we're going to surround her name with light and love until she is found and after and forever. And we will never ever forget her. Love you, baby girl.